Hello, all. Thanks for joining the DUG webinar hosted by MS Dynamics World. Today we are going to speak about streamlining data integration and ETL process between Azure Data Factory and D365 FNO. A quick intro about me. Myself, Anitha Eswaran. I am working for Sonata Software Europe Limited. Our company leverages Microsoft products and platforms to develop tailored solutions for the clients, spanning areas such as ERPs, CRM, business intelligence, data analytics, application development, and cloud migration. Apart from this, there are many more areas which are covered by our company. You can check on their website for more information. So, I embarked my professional journey 17 years ago with Dynamics FNO, and now as an architect, I continuously embrace the learning, keeping pace with the latest updates each day. So, I also author a blog, and my blog details and my LinkedIn details are given below. To stay updated on my latest post, you can also subscribe to my newsletter, which can be found from my LinkedIn details as well. So, what is the agenda for today? A quick intro about ADF, the Azure Data Factory, and features and the components of ADF. And in the Azure portal, then we will be moving on to in Azure portal, where I will be giving you the walkthrough of the components, dataset creation, pipelines and execution, like what are the how the data flows are done, how to monitor the logs, and how the integration, and the main topic, what is the integration with FNO, integration of data migrate ADF using with FNO using the ETL process, which is extract, transformation, and load. So what is Azure Data Factory? Azure Data Factory is a cloud-based integration service. It is a data integration service provided by Microsoft Azure. It allows us to create, schedule, and manage data-driven workflows known as pipelines that can move and transform the data between the supported data sources. There are various data sources in the data factory, which I will be showing you in the demo. During the portal walkthrough, I will be able to show you what are all the workflows, what are all the different data sources supported by the ADF. So be it on premises or in the cloud. So it can ingest data from multiple data sources, and it can even transform, and it can load into the data warehouses, data lakes, or any other destinations for analytical and reporting purposes. Thus, Azure Data Factory is a critical component in building modern data pipelines and enabling the data engineers and the scientists to work with data effectively. So it can also support both batch processing and real-time processing. In essence, it plays a vital role for business and organizations looking to drive insight from their data. It plays a central role in the ETL and the ELT processes, which are fundamental for the data warehousing, analytics, and business intelligence. I hope you have got a good walkthrough of idea of what Data Factory does. Let us move on to the key features. So there are a number of key features. There are multiple key features for ADF. I have handpicked few of them just to cover in our webinar. One is data transformation and the movement. So ADF can move the data between various data sources and perform the transformations using compute services such as Azure HD Insight, Azure Batch, and Azure Data Analytics. So what happens is it allows you to create and schedule. It can also manage the data workflows. It is often referred to as pipelines. So how the pipelines and what is the purpose of pipeline, that we will be getting to dive in deeper detail in the next few seconds, in the next few minutes. So what happens, these pipelines would facilitate the movement and the transformation of data between various data sources and destination. The next is serverless integration service. So if we are using ADF, you don't need to worry about the infrastructure, as ADF is a serverless service where you can only focus on setting up your data pipelines. One advantage of ADF is it can scale dynamically to handle large volumes of data, and you don't need to worry about the cost because it provides the cost management features which help you to optimize your data integration cost via the hybrid data movement. Awesome, isn't it? Various data store support. So there are wide range of data sources. Not only it is not limited to the blob storage or the SQL data warehouse, it can also into the on-premises servers and many more. It can move the data across on-premises and cloud environments. Thus, in essence, we can say it is an extensible ecosystem, ensuring the flexibility in data integration. Visual tools. So In short, you can say it as visual authoring, because if you see the visual interface of ADF, it is very easy for building and managing the pipelines. It is very user friendly, and which you will be seeing it when I'm giving you a walkthrough in the portal. And it reduces the need to write code and making it accessible for both technical and non-technical users. Triggered runs and scheduling. So as usual, pipelines. Here comes the pipeline. Pipeline can also be triggered on a schedule in response to an alert of the external event or manually. This makes it versatile for different use cases where the data needs to be processed at specific times or upon the specific conditions. Monitoring and management. ADF provides the facility to monitor data pipelines. You can even track the progress. And if there are any failures, you can easily detect and respond to the failures. So what happens, this feature is, this would help us, the data pipelines are resilient and reliable, and it has built-in monitoring and alerting capabilities. Built-in fault tolerance and recovery. So it has the capabilities. You can even set up a retry features. It has the built-in capability for retry policy. So ensuring that transient failures, they don't bring down the workflows. You can set up the alert mechanism, or even you have a retry policy. So thus it makes sure that the workflow doesn't fail as soon as in the event of first failure itself. Security, of course, because everywhere we are dealing with the data. So data is transferred securely over HTTPS or the express route, and is also encrypted at rest when it is in Azure. And the data security and the compliance are crucial. And ADF provides the features like data encryption at rest and in transit. And it can also be controlled via the role-based access control. And auditing helps you to maintain the data integrity and security. The next are the components of ADF. So you can interrelate. There are the few terms keeps repeating from features, components, and even in the demo. So this is how the ADF is interlinked here. Pipelines. So I have already given you what pipelines are in the features thing. So a pipeline is a logical grouping of activities that together perform a task. So here you have a set of activities to perform on your data, and the pipeline coordinates when and how the activities are run. What are activities? They represent a processing step in a pipeline. So you have various activities, including the data movement activities, like you can copy the data, or if you want to read the metadata, or if you want to do some condition, if loop, for loop, all these are all called as activities. And even if you want to do a data transformation activities via a SQL procedure or via the data flow, all these are possible. Next is dataset. I again repeat, because dataset represent the structure of data which you are either moving or transforming. For instance, you can define the datasets for tables, files, folders in the different data stores like blob storage, data warehouse, etc. Linked services. These are the connection strings, because here you can think them as a bridge where it connects the data and dataset and the external application. So they define the information needed for ADF to connect to the external resources. For instance, if you want to connect the ADF to the Azure SQL database, you would define a linked service containing the connection details for that database. Data flows. Then data flows are the graphical interface for transformation with data flows. And you can even design the transformations using a visual tool, which then translates these visual designs into the Spark code. So here, for instance, if you want to do any transformation, for instance, if you want to convert the text into a proper date format, if you want to alter any text, these are all done in the data flow. Parameters and variables. So if you want to make your ADF dynamic, there comes the parameter into picture. So you can pass the values into pipelines, and the dataset can to make your activities more dynamic. So as usual, variables, as we are aware, it is used to store the values for use within your pipelines. The next are these are all few components. On top of it, we have triggers. So where you can define the executing the pipeline, and either it can be a time based or an event based trigger. And you also have a component for debugging and monitoring, and you have the control flow, and there are something called as output and error handling. These are all the components which also falls into the key features category. So I have grouped them as components and key feature. Now let us go back to our demo. So this is the portal. In the search bar, you will be able to see how to search for the data factory, and even in the recent tabs, you will be able to see the data factory. I have already created a data factory for you, and if you want to create a new one, you need to click on the new button, and you need to create a proper resource group followed by the name. Since I have already created a data factory, let us go back to that new one, and here you need to launch the studio. It takes few seconds to launch the studio, and where you will be able to get a look and feel of how the studio looks. Here, this is the overall view of the studio. The recent resources have been captured here. The home icon takes you to the main screen. You have a pencil icon here, which is mainly for authoring purpose, like for creation or updating. Whatever the processes you are going to do, this will be in the edit mode. So here you have pipelines. If you remember, I had told you what the pipelines, it is a set of activities. And the data sets. There are plenty of data sets here. So in the coming demo, I will be able to show you what are the various data sets we have. Mainly in the data flows, you will be doing the transformation. In the monitor section, you will be able to see what are all the pipelines which have been executed. You can filter it by last 7 days and you will be able to see. This is in the debug mode. Even here you have an option. By default, it shows the last 24 hours execution. If you want to see the executions based on the date, you will be able to see this. Now going back to the author menu. Before jumping onto the pipelines, I will tell you how to create the data sets. Here you have a hamburger symbol. Click on new data. So if you want to create a new folder, you can do it. Demo. And inside this, you will be able to create whatever data sets you have. A new data set, you have an option to rename. You can move the item. You can even delete the folder. And you have an option to create a folder inside the folder, that is subfolder. So now let us focus on creating a new data set. As soon as you click on the new data set, you will be presented with various options here. And here you have an option to see what are all these are all the data sets grouped according to their nature. For instance, these are all the data sets related to the Azure, few related to database. For example, the SQL, Azure DB, all this SQL Server, SAP, Spark, all this. And something related to the file. If you want to create the data from the FTP or SFTP, even you have an option to click here. No SQL, these are all the cases. And if you want to create something for services and applications, Dynamics 365, CRM, even if you want to do it from the Dataverse, everything is possible. So now let us see if you have the option for external applications as well. Salesforce, if you want to read the data from the SharePoint, that is also possible. So now let us see how to create a data set using a blob storage. As soon as you click on the blob storage, here you have an option to show what are all the formats available for your particular data set. So if you are selecting a delimited text, click on this and you can demo, you can give a name and the linked service here. So for example, the linked service serves as a bridge between the ADF and the external data sources here. So I will show you how to create a new linked service. Linked service 1. You can give any description, and since we are going to connect only to the storage account, if you have the subscription details will be automatically listed. If you want to create this, if you are going to access the subscription using the storage account and the storage account pin, you will be able to give it here. So upon clicking create, this would help you to check whether the connection is successful or not. So this is how you will be creating the linked service. Now going back to the data sets which I've already created for you. I have a data set here in my storage account. So where the linked service is already set. If you want to test connection, you have an option and you'll be able to get the connection is successful. And this is where my data is available. And there is an option to preview the data as well. So this is the data here. And at the moment, my the file CSV file is a comma separated. If you want to have a pipe delimiter or a tab limiter, you will be able to select accordingly. My row delimiter at the moment is this one, the carriage return. If you want to keep only the carriage return, you can keep it. And This has the schema. So for example, in my file, I have only these two, customer group ID and the description and parameters. So if you want to have a separate parameters to trigger this particular delimited text to the CSV file, then you will be able to add the parameters as well. If you have noted something, as soon as I do a change of anything, if I make any correction to this, you will see a change here, a symbol of dot here. So which means that there are some changes made and it is not yet published. If you want to publish, then you need to click on the publish button. So if you don't want to do anything, just click close and discard the changes. So that takes care of saving, bringing your old version itself. And if you want to select the JSON format, it is also possible. And rest remains the same. You can test connection, and if you want to see the schema, even that is also possible. And what are the parameters here? So here at the moment, my data set is only for the CSV data, CSV file format. If you have various file formats, or even if you want to have to external applications like Azure SQL DB or the Salesforce or Dynamics CRM or any other applications, it is possible via this dataset resource. Now going back to the next factory resource, copy data. How do you create a pipeline? If you want to create a pipeline, you need to click pipeline plus symbol here, and here you will have an option to create a pipeline. You can rename this pipeline as per your requirement, and I will show you. See, and this will be added to your this folder by default. If you want to add this to another folder, you can create a new folder here and then map it to that particular folder. Let me show you what are all the activities present in that pipeline. So these activities are grouped based on their nature. So only if you create a pipeline, the activities tab will appear. So if you remember, components and the activities, pipelines and the activities go hand in hand. So pipeline is a collection of these activities, and that is the reason only if you click a pipeline, these activities would appear. So if you want to transform or move the data, these activities will be useful. For instance, the copy data here would immediately would have a better performance when you have a voluminous data. So using this copy data, that saves the execution time better. You will be able to see the better performance time here. And the data flow, I will tell you what is data flow. So it is mainly useful for transforming the data. So the main purpose of using ADF is for the ETL, right? Extract, transform, unload. So how the transformation is done is using this data flow. This covers the move and transform. On top of it, if you want to see the synapse, something you need to do some activity on the synapse, you have this data explorer. And if you want to call a Azure function from your pipeline, that is also possible. So the options are not limited, that you should be able to use only few of the activities. It is widespread here. And if you want to have any batch service, how do you do it? Just drag and drop, and you will be able to see what batch service you are able to do it. And in general, if there are something anyway, whenever you are going to do something, whenever you are going to have any loop, so all these general activities would come for your use. So if you want to do something for incrementing the variable or updating the variable, then this append variable will be useful. And if you want to delete the particular data set, delete the data in the particular data set, you don't need to have any additional extra code. Call this activity and that does the work for you. Execute pipeline, a pipeline which calls another pipeline. So you can invoke a pipeline from this pipeline. So if you want to execute a pipeline in sequence, then the execute pipeline will be useful. Even if you want to execute a SSIS package, you have an activity. And I will show you what is the metadata in my demo here. And lookup, it would read the data from a particular file. So that is also I have covered in the demo. You can call the stored procedure. You have an option to call the script, and set variable. Set variable is just assigning a variable. So obviously, whenever you are executing a pipeline, there should be some or other variable holding the value, and then you will be needed to increment or decrement or set the variable value of the variable, right? So this variable would be helpful. And the web. This web activity is what I have used in the integration, so that I will be able to show you how this web plays a role in integration here. And wait, in this case, wait would make the execution wait. If you want to take some delay in between the execution, then wait can be used. On top of it, if you want to have anything from the HD side, and iteration and conditional. So there is an option of filtering the data, which I will show you in this data flow. For each condition, if condition, switch condition, everything is possible in the activity section. So you can, if you are familiar with the logic apps, you will be able to correlate how it is done in logic apps, and the same way is being done in ADF also. Let me close this. I will go to the copy data pipeline. So this is the copy data which I have done. The name can be a user entry. Source is the demo, the data set which I have already configured. So that will be my source. If you want to do it recursively, you can do it. And even you have an option, you don't need to be the data set need not be constant always. So if you want to pick a file which is of type or prefix, or if you have any wildcard file path, even that is also possible. And or if you want to pick the file which is last modified by so and so date, it will be possible if you enter these parameters. Sync is called the destination here. So which means that copy data does the data copying from source to sync. This is the one. I am going to copy this from this copied group demo to this copied group demo. So the copy behavior, either it can flatten or it can merge or it can preserve the hierarchy. So which means that it will append. And if you want to do the mapping, here this is the mapping. So even if the data can be created from the scratch. So at the moment, if you to keep it on a simple side, I have mapped it earlier. And these are all I left it as default one. So if you want to execute it, there are two types of execution here. One is debugging. Debugging is just how a debugging to check if that is something is working or not. So it is just a quick execution. Add trigger, in the real-time scenario, if you want to execute this particular pipeline using an external trigger or based on some recurrence, then this add trigger comes into picture. So for instance, if I do a debug here, then this run will be monitored. This run can be monitored in the monitored flag here. For instance, if I do here, you will be able to see what is the pipeline run ID, and if you keep refreshing, it will be showing you the progress also. See, it has copied the data, and it goes off once you close it. But if you want to see what was the previous execution, you can go to the monitor and you have an option of debug here where you will be able to see the execution. This one you will be able to track it for the triggered date one. If you want to add a trigger, you can do it and just click OK. So this will be for the triggering pipeline. So where you will be able to monitor it here as well. If you see, this is where it is happening. If you see, this particular run execution was happened here. Okay, so this covers the copy data. And next comes the metadata. So metadata here, what it does is, it will be giving you the properties of a file. So if you want to see, for instance, I want to read the properties, metadata of this particular file. Okay, so here you have number of arguments. For instance, in my case, I am going to take what is the name of the file and what is the item type. So these arguments will be useful when the execution is when the file type is generic. So for instance, if you want to pick the file from a particular location, only a location is known here for you. And if you want to pick only the file item type, this will be useful. So here you have various options. If you see, for instance, column count, exist, last modified size, these are all the parameters which is available, the arguments which is available for the metadata. Let me close this and execute it for you. I am just going to give a simple debugger to make my execution faster. So it takes few seconds to execute it because this is pretty fast and it is not going to take much time. If you see, this is the output, this is the input, and this is the output. So the output, if you see, I have taken in my argument, I have specified the item type and item name. So here it has given the item name of this one, the name of my file, and what is the file, what is the item type, whether it can be a file or it can be a JPEG, what is the image. If it is an image, it will give the image type. All this can be found using this. Okay, here comes our main part of discussion where I will be going to show you how the data is integrated with FNO using real-time scenario as well as the recurrent scenario. So this is the first scenario where the real-time, it is via OData. So here I have imported using the data flow. I have updated the data with filter and updated the data using two columns here. So as usual here, the sync, it starts with the source. So my source would be the simple data set here. And if you see, the source options are various. You can same as whether the file is last modified, whether you want to have a list of files, all this. Even if you want to take a data preview, it is possible. You need to just turn on the data debug and it will take some time to load this, to enable this setting. But what happens, what is the advantage of this is how the data looks after it goes through the all these steps. And this is how the production is. So here by default it picks as string. If you want to convert it to a different format, even that is possible. If you want to convert, for instance, the source data is coming as for a string, but if you want to convert it to a datetime format, even that is also possible here. Next comes filter. So for instance, if you remember, I had showed you there are three records in my source file. So here I will be filtering the records where I am going to pick only the customer group ID is equal to demo1. So here what happens is, as soon as I click the filter, how do you click the filter here? Here you have multiple option where you have a new branch, you can join the data, you can join two datas here and then two sources here and then insert it into one of the filter. So then you have a schema modifier. So this is where the actual, if there are any transformation has to be done, then this can be done under the schema modifier section. Okay. And if you want to format the data, flatten or stringify the data, that is possible. Row modifier. What is row modifier? If you want to filter the data like how I am doing, that is also possible. Sort. If you want to sort the data before you do any transformation, that is possible. For instance, if your file is having a created date and if you want to sort, pick only the latest date, then that is also possible. If you want to alter a row, that is also possible here. Obviously, the destination sync would be the last step in the data flow here, and that would be the last step here. So here in the filter, I am applying only to pick the data, which is demo1 here. And here nothing much, you are only going to use the partitioning here. If you see, it is used in filter. Since this is the customer group ID, I have used this in filter. This is brought, this is a tick mark, this is a correct tick mark here. And this is actually the debug session is going to start. So once it starts, I will tell you how it looks. And if you want to add anything else, for example, if you want to add equals, you have so many concatenation here. If you see, these are all the functions here. Array, ASCII, A10, whatever you want to convert as the expression values, these are all can be seen here. And after this is made, you don't even need to close this screen and see how the data looks. The data preview here would bring the data for you. So with this, you will be able to check whether the data is proper or not. So now we have applied filter. So out of 3 records, we are picking only 1 record here, correct? So that record I am going to do the transformation. So this is a simple transformation. So I have one record with 2 columns. So what I am going to do, I am going to update this column. I am going to do this particular column called description. I am going to update it with concatenate with updated. So I already have some description value there. On top of it, I am going to bring this as updated. So this is how the transformation does. This I have done using derived column. So what is derived column? In this derived column, schema modifier. See, so this is how in the derived column you have an option to do all this. And now once the data debug flow is ready, you will get an alert. And here you will be able to see the data preview. You need to wait. You need to come and refresh here. And also you should come and refresh here. This takes only few seconds and then automatically it will bring the data for you here. Refresh, and this is also refresh. 1 second, let it load. Once this loads, then rest of the columns will also be loaded. And the last one is sync. Sync is, as usual, I told, that is the destination where you will be bringing all this altered data. The extract transform is being done here. The data is extracted here and the data is transformed here and it is loaded to a destination. It is called sync. So I am converting that to a JSON file. Okay. And here also I am just testing if my connection is okay or not. So that would tell me whether the data, whether my connection is fine or not. See, the connection is successful. And here you will have an option to map the data. So what is the data in my source? It has to be mapped to this particular column here. Now going back to this one, if you see, I have 3 records here. Okay. This is my source. And if I go to the refresh here, that would end up in 1 record because I am filtering. If you see, this is, I am only going to filter this record. So in the filter, what happens? I am getting only one record, right? And in the derived column, what happens? I am going to turn this record demo description to demo updated. So that is what my column does, correct? The derived column does. So if I go here, if you see, this has been done as demo description updated. So my data is ready and it is ready to move to sync. If I again refresh, so this is not going to, the data flow, what you see here is not going to happen actually until and unless you run the pipeline. This is just an data flow, an idea of data, how it will be looking after these transformations are done. Even if you want to export to CSV, that is possible. See, if you see the JSON format is ready here and this is done. So here completes the data flow. Now going back to my data import, the first is I am adding a data flow. So the data flow here, I am going to add the data flow. If you want to rename, even that is also possible after you publish the changes. Here you can come and rename and then you need to publish again. Then the next is auth token. So for instance, since we are sending the data to the FNO here, what happens is we need to always communicate via auth token, correct? So if you are familiar with the postman, you will be able to get this details. So this is just a tenant followed by all this data like client credentials, client ID, secret, and the URL. So this one I have already given the details in my blog. So you can check in my blog and see how the web token has been configured. If you remember, this is the web activity which I showed you here. For instance, here I have a web activity. So I dragged and dropped this web activity and I will be able to connect it. So here, even if you see, you have 4 options. So even if it is successful, you can do. What happens if you are on a failure? You can make a block. And what happens if it is a completion? What should happen? And what happens if you want skipping this particular step? What happens when it is skipped, when it is successful, when it is failure, when it is completed? So with all the activities, you will be able to get these details. Next is read data via lookup. So what happens here? So since if you remember, the data flow had pushed the data to the JSON file. So what happens here? I am reading the data. You want to read the data before pushing it, right? So how the data is read? It is via the lookup. So in the lookup, I am just everywhere it plays with the data set. So in the data set, I am going to read this. Okay. And it is nothing. So if you want to read only the first row, it will be, you need to check this. But if you want to read the entire file, please uncheck this, because by default, whenever you create a lookup, it will bring the first row will be always marked as yes. So please make sure this is always unchecked. And next comes the iteration. So for instance, the lookup gives the data one after the other in a sequence. So you need to have some loop to read the data, correct? So that is what the for each comes into picture. You need to drag and drop the for each. And what would be the data? What would be the input for it? This will be the input from the read data. So what is read data? It is the lookup. So the value of output value of the read data will be the item, the count. If you remember, for I is equal to 0, I is equal to less blah blah blah, all this, the I, you can remember this as I. So the iteration is ready here. And if you click inside, this is the next option where you are going to push the data via OData approach. This is a simple customer group. I am going to push the data, and using, if you're familiar with the postman, you will be able to do it. This is via the post approach, postman. This is a post method. So if you want to do a get or post, you can do it. And this is nothing but the current item. Item, for instance, if you have imagined the current item as I, it will be the item here. And make sure the authorization, what you have read, what you have generated in the first step is also being passed, because without this authorization, FNO will not be able to accept the data for you. So this is how the authorization, you need to get the access token of this one. Okay. So if I want to execute this data for you, you can do a click debug. This will take some time. The reason being, the data flow will take some time to complete the ETL process, because this is where the actual ETL is being done, right? This will take few minutes in the sense, yeah, it will take 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So after that, the rest of the steps would be faster. So before it completes, by the time it runs, I will go to the recurrence import. So the one which you have seen for the OData is this input, the real-time input using OData. This is a recurrence where you are pushing the data to a recurrent job which is already set in FNO. So let me go back to the FNO screen. I have created a simple import project here with the customer groups of CSV format. And in the manage recurring job, I have set the details as well here. Okay. And I have set the recurrence. So this is the ID, the NQ ID, which I will be using. So whatever data is being pushed there, it will automatically come and see the status here. It will create a message here. So this is how I have set a recurrence in FNO. Going back to my ADF screen, as usual, I am generating a token here. So here token, the same setup, what I have shown you in OData import. And in this case, what is happening? We are going to read the file. My file is placed in this demo container, the storage. So I am going to read this file from this URL. So if you want to have a generic URL, then you need to use the metadata which I have shown, which I have already explained, right? Using the metadata, you will be able to construct the dynamic URL in this case. So this is a get method. It is not a post because you are going to read the contents of the file. So that should be via a get method. And since you are reading the file and there is no authentication is required. Going back to this web, the next activity, import using recurrence. So here I have already given the NQ job. If you search in, this is those who are familiar with the recurrence FNO, you will be able to correlate how this NQ job is created. So I have created a simple NQ job, and via the post method, this will be the response of the read file method, read file activity. So this would send you the activity, and this would be, let me execute it for you, then you will be able to understand. So, and don't forget to bring the authorization here, because authorization plays a major role. Without authorization, you will not be able to send the record. Let me debug it. Okay, so let us go and see if the OData approach is done or not. So because if there is some failure, no worries. It is easy to see because here it says the customer group is already existing. Okay, and that is the reason. OData, it only creates the data. If you want to update, you need to use a different command called patch. So here I have used post. So even whatever the failure, see all the one whichever you have, you will be able to backtrack what is being done here. If you want to read the data, see the JSON format is clearly seen in the output, and the for each loop. So the for each loop is failed. The reason being the activity inside that for each loop has failed. That is the reason it has shown as failed. So if you want to see what is the input has been passed to this particular activity, this would help you. See, along with the bearer token, this has passed, and see, this is how the the body is being constructed here. And since this is already available, since this particular customer group demo 1 is already available in my system, OData has shooted the error to me. And now let us go back to the recurrence import. Let us see how it goes. Here it has generated a token, and it has very well read the file here. So this is the contents of the file. Wow. And this is import using recurrence. So here it will only say give you the message ID. See, this is the message ID what has been created as a part of your recurrence here. So if I go back to my FNO, if I click here, the manage recurring job, in the manage messages, I will be able to see there is a data created. So what DM of this, what this tries to attempt is to update the data if it is already existing. Otherwise, it will create a new data. And after this, how do you know this is the job what has been sent by this particular recurrence? So I can show you. See, 4728. So as a part output of this particular NQ, this is being brought. This is the output 472A. If I go back to the message, this is the same message ID what has been given. Thus, we have covered both the integration, how the integration has handled. So if you see the data, OData, this has taken some time. Do you see this has taken 52 seconds for the data flow. So if the data is more, it will take a little time because it has to do the entire extract and transform process, right? If at all there are something in the data flow activity. So that would take some time. Rest of the activities, they are faster. So this completes the demo of how the integration happens between the OData using OData import and the recurrence import using ADF. Now the demo is over. So we will be moving on to the next section. Key takeaways. So we have seen what are all the factory resources and how the pipelines are being constructed. So how various types of data sets can be used in as available in ADF, and there are a number of data set using with the help of, there are a number of data sets like JSON, CSV, or external data sources like Salesforce, Dynamics. So there are a number of options where we have seen how to configure that in dataset, and the data flow where the actual data transformation is being done, and how the LinkedIn services are being created if you want to establish the connection, which acts as a bridge from ADF to FN to other application. The next is what are all the activities, how these are all being done here, and using the where they are grouped according to their nature. If you want to transform, if you want to loop something, all these are grouped under activities. And how the data copy data from is done, and how effective it is when you have a large amount of data. And what is the purpose of metadata? If you want to read something on the metadata for your particular object, how the metadata gives you a hand in that. And how the pipeline runs can be monitored. If you want to check the triggered pipeline or the debugged pipeline, even that is also possible using the monitor runs there. Thank you. And this brings us to the end of the webinar. If you want to have any information, if you want to have any questions, I will be available. I know this is a recorded webinar, but happy to connect if you have any doubts. And I am always available. You can reach me in my LinkedIn ID, or you can subscribe to my blog and newsletter, or you can email me for any clarifications. Thank you, Dynamics User Group and MS Dynamics World, for giving me an opportunity to share my knowledge with our community members. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.